Hello again, I am Blunty. In a previous video, I made a comment about how making your own bread has become a bit of a trend right now, and I mentioned a traditional Australian bread called damper. And today I figured I might show you how simple it is to make and share a bit of Aussie history along the way. Damper is ideal as basic sustenance, being made from very few ingredients and also very easy to make. It's the first thing many Aussie kids are taught to cook, as a matter of fact. The new fad of homemade bread has arrived partly because there's always a new trend in food, especially when it comes to the insipidly copycat think-free trend-driven realm of Instagram, like idiotically fancy donuts or over-the-top milkshakes or any number of foods made more difficult to actually consume just so they look better in an Instagram photo. It drives me nuts, frankly. There are even restaurants that have specifically changed their menus and their menu photography style to encourage people who are more interested in buying Instagram-worthy food than they are actual food itself. But with the new bread trend, it is at least tied to useful practicality, given the challenges we're facing right now as a community, with the pandemic and all. In case you hadn't noticed, people being forced to become a little bit more self-sufficient, asked to leave the house as little as possible, and to find ways to entertain ourselves. And home cooking and baking is superb for that. You can save money, you can kill time, you can learn new skills, have fun, fill your home with wonderful, comforting smells, and avoid extra trips to the supermarkets because instead of going out to buy fresh bread every day or two, you can buy sufficient ingredients to make a week or a month worth of your own daily fresh bread. And you're stuck inside anyway, so the extra time and effort involved in this kind of endeavour is easier to manage and fit around your work from home plan, or if you're rather less fortunate, lack of or limited work. The bread I mentioned specifically in a video earlier this week is a traditional Australian bread called damper. At least it's traditional for white Aussies, based as it is on wheat flour, something unknown to the Aboriginal Australians, until the white fellow landed here and pointed at everything in sight and said, "Yeah, that's mine. I'll have some of that. In fact, I'll have all of it." Fun fact, by the way, the original Aussies were, it seems, some of the world's very first bakers. Archaeologists have discovered millstones as old as 36,000 years old, right here in New South Wales, where I live. Grindstones used by Aboriginal Australians to turn native seeds into flours for baking. There is also evidence of even older grinding tools used by Aboriginals, but these are believed to be for grinding up materials for pigments, for painting, but who knows? But lacking easy access at the best of times, much less right now, to native seeds like native Australian millet or spinifex or wattle seed and kangaroo grass to make some traditional Aboriginal seed cakes, I'm sticking with damper today. Damper, like many similar soda breads across many cultures, was originally developed by people who lived, worked and travelled through remote areas. In the case of damper, it was the stockmen and jackaroos, what those more familiar with American culture might call cowboys and ranchers. Stockmen had basic rations provided for them, usually flour, sugar and tea, and whatever meat was available, or they could catch it wild. Milk and baking soda were also used, but a bit of a privilege. If you were very lucky, you might also have some butter. Now, the recipe I'm using here is a bit modernised and not entirely traditional at all, partly because breads like this can be used as a base for all kinds of variations, much of which are tastier than the basic form, and partly out of necessity. The variation part here is using some unsalted butter for a much tastier result, and some sultanas for some sweetness. The necessity part is I'm using oat flour, not wheat flour. I am completely out of regular flour as it happens. And as it happens, so is my local supermarket, like I said. Bit of a fad going on at the moment around homemade bread and baking, so flour is, well, it's harder to get than usual. Not quite as hard as toilet paper, but still difficult. Traditionally, damper was baked in the ashes of a fire, not the coals, the ashes. Or, and this is how many Aussie school kids were taught on excursions and trips to historical places and such, the dough is wrapped around a stick and baked over the fire. Kind of like you'd roast a marshmallow. In both cases, you'd know it was done when you could tap on the crust and it sounded hard and hollow. In my example today, as I live in a city where campfires are rather frowned upon outside and lighting one inside is somewhat of a small health and safety issue, I have made mine in an oven. This was also done traditionally by stockmen if they happen to have a camp oven with them. A camp oven is similar to what most would call a Dutch oven, a thick-walled cooking pot with a tight-fitting lid, usually made from cast iron, and therefore, being heavy-ass bitches, they weren't travelled with much, but they were used when closer to home or at an established semi-permanent camp. Now, like I said before, damper is a kind of soda bread, which means instead of yeast, it uses sodium bicarbonate, baking soda to you and me, as a leveling agent. You can use self-raising flour for this if you like. That literally is just regular wheat flour with baking soda pre-mixed in, nothing more special about it than that. But like I said, I'm using oat flour, so I've added in some baking soda. When wet, the baking soda releases carbon dioxide, which is trapped in the dough as small bubbles, which makes the bread light and soft, without the need for the time-consuming process of a yeast-based recipe, which needs to be left to rise before baking and also needs much more careful temperature control to make a good end product. Too hot or too cold and the yeast won't work properly. It's overall a bit of a more fiddly bread. So damper was wonderfully handy. Quick and easy to make, going from raw ingredients to edible, fresh, warm bread inside of half an hour. And bread that can be made from very few ingredients and nearly nothing in the way of utensils and equipment. You can literally do this with nothing more than a bowl. And even that much can be improvised if you really, really had to. The recipe is wildly flexible too, opening up all kinds of interesting and tasty variations. Commonly, you can easily mix in all kinds of dried fruit. They also keep really, really well and add a lovely tastiness and sweetness to the bread. Traditionally, it was eaten both warm or left to cool and served with dried meat, camp stews, and for a sweeter treat, with golden syrup. The luckier might have even had some butter or jam. I like mine with a bit of jam. Strawberry, if you please. Blackcurrant, if you don't mind. Raspberry's not bad also. Bit of marmalade, it's not bad. But now you've learned something of Australian history, both native and settler, and have a wildly easy bread to try out, either through basic necessity or through curiosity, or just something to do, something to teach the kids, perhaps. But of course, the real proof is in the pudding, as it were. So now that I've got my hero shot, let's see how I actually did with this particular batch of damper, because this is, in fact, the first time I tried to make this with oat flour. It's a little bit flaky. Get some jam on there. Ooh, it's still steaming. I don't know whether you can see that on the camera, but there's still lots of steam coming off it. All right. Could have done with slightly longer in the oven. Still a little bit doughy in the middle. Not raw, just a little bit doughy. But delicious. Absolutely delicious. Salt, perfect. Sweetness, perfect. Very same. Texture, could use a little bit of work. But considering it's the first time I tried using oat flour to make this, not so bad at all. Just a little bit like a scone, actually. Closer to a scone than a traditional wheat bread, I guess. Give it a go. Let me know how you go. Okay, that loaf's not going to last a day. I'm very happy with how I've done here. Small joys. That's what it's about, guys. Small joys. Just get that. A little bit of joy here and there. So, thank you for watching. Pardon me while I speak with a mouthful. Thank you to my patrons in particular. And hopefully somewhere along the way, you decided to make sure you subscribed, ring the bell, leave a comment, do the thumb, the whole thing. Especially come back and leave a comment if you try the recipe, or if you try a variation of the recipe, or if you have a variation of your own you want to try, or you have tried, or you swear by. You can go away now. I gotta finish it. Happy Blunty's happy.